Yo, so what's up? So you're here for another episode with House of I-10. You know, it's your boy AK, and we're gonna talk about these presidential results. Oh man, Donald Trump say he finna get it back in blood. Hey, he came with it, you know, the Republican Party. We really got to talk about where we're going as a nation and what that response was. All right, so let's get into it. So let's talk about what was going on with these particular results. And, you know, like as a nation, I know some people right now are really going through a hard time, really trying to digest and just coming to this whole reckoning of, you know, what this country represents, how it chooses to represent itself on the world stage. You had, you know, some people feel like a very qualified candidate and Vice President Harris. I mean, I read something you're talking about in the last 300 years of presidential candidates that could have won, she would have been the only person to serve in the White House that worked in all three branches of our government. You know, so I think that that's like major accomplishments and speaks to her ability to understand governing. But when you running for president too, you know, it's all about that charm. It's about that charisma. It's not necessarily all about intelligence, you know, from what we can see, but you got to be able to connect with voters, and people have to really want to associate themselves with you and see you as a true bona fide leader for this country. And, you know, it brings up a large discussion about if this country is willing to have women lead them. You know, we were in our own echo chambers in the Black community, of course. And, you know, two questions that I always ask is, can she get more votes than Hillary Clinton? That was number one. And then what are other minorities going to do? How are other minorities going to feel about her representing them on the world stage? And, you know, for the first one, what I found out was very interesting as well is that she actually, when it came to women turnout, she actually got lower votes than both both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump when it came to women. And of course, if you want to go back even further, you know, she got lower votes from women for President Barack Obama. So I think that that says a lot because, you know, there was this narrative and people were trying to scapegoat Black men, and talking about Black men, you know, need to show up, especially former President Barack Obama was scolding Black men. But when we look at those results, which we're going to look at, you know, the numbers don't lie. As they say, men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. And those numbers reflected that Black men were not the issue, and that they should have paid attention to other groups out here, other demographics out here. So, you know, and it just brings up and drives a very important conversation that we need to have as a community, as a people, moving forward. So checking in on this electoral college and seeing what these outcomes are from across this nation, we can just see what that breakdown when you talk about swing states. And when you look at, so the map on the left, the smaller map right there, you can see what the one that's on the screen currently, you can see what the 2020 electoral college maps look like. So you got Wisconsin, you got Michigan here, you know, you got Nevada, you got Arizona. All of these are those blue stronghold states. Even Georgia, you know, Georgia was very important because of the turnout and grassroots efforts of what Stacey Abrams was able to do in the state of Georgia. You know, benefactors of that is Senator Raphael Warnock as well. And, you know, you look at Pennsylvania, which is always a stronghold for for the Democratic Party as well, and of course Virginia too. But when we go and we pull up what happened in 2024, and you see a lot of these states, I'm talking about Wisconsin, I'm talking about Michigan, Pennsylvania, and even Georgia. When you look at what happened with these states and how Donald Trump was able to flip these states red, this was very important. Those battleground states, those swing states, they have a tremendous impact on turnout because we're dealing with these electoral votes and just the landslide of victory for Donald Trump to be able to capture these particular electoral college votes. And I mean, he even wins the popular vote in the end as well. You know, before when we had the Hillary Clinton situation, you know, she won the popular vote, but he won the electoral vote. You know, with Joe Biden was able to, I think, capture, I think it was like 81 million, possibly even 84 million on the popular vote. And now you look at this one, and you can see that, of course, less people voted in this election, it looks like as well. And but yeah, Joe Biden got 81 million in the popular vote from 2020. You see less people voted because Donald Trump only pulled 71 and Harris pulled 67. And so there's a huge factor of people that we have to acknowledge that decided to sit out this very election and not show up. But you know, we also have to go to those states, right, and talk about, well, what happened in Michigan. You know, who were they able to get? I heard a lot of the, you know, we talk about our immigrant communities up there, such as, you know, in Dearborn, Michigan, they turned out significantly for Trump. Of course, white voters, and you know, people in Pennsylvania, some of those Democratic strongholds in Pennsylvania also flipped. And we're dealing with those surrounding counties, and what they said about, particularly when we talk about white women, is those white suburban women were the ones who really showed up and showed out for Trump. You know, and having this conversation about feminism, you know, women supporting women and, you know, women empowerment, they went the other way. So as many communities did, which, you know, we can also reflect and show in the numbers and in the data as well, which is important for us to really have a breakdown on what happened and what occurred. And that's why it's so important for you to have these numbers and do statistical analysis. But even before we dive into that, as I was mentioning, when you're running for president, there has to be a persona, there has to be a people dynamic that is represented with her. And I don't think most people felt like she was making those necessary connections that she needed to, which also speaks to who's in leadership with the Democratic Party, who are these political strategists right now, because the way that they were beat, I mean, across the board, because a lot of this focuses on Donald Trump, but we also have to focus on the Senate. The Senate is flipped red and majority red. And at this time of the airing of this particular segment, the House is trending red. You know, they have to get, I think, 7 seats in the House, and I think Democrats have to get 15 seats. So they have a higher mountain to climb in order to claim victory within the House, which is not looking like that's going to happen. But I know a couple places are too close to call. So this was a red wave, if you will, of victory for the Republican Party across this nation. And I think that people are really speaking and sending a direct message to the Democratic Party and to other minorities in this nation, but particularly the Democratic Party, those on the left, and are essentially saying, like, what you're focusing on, what you're choosing to represent in our community, we're not signing up for it. We don't want that. We have a different vision for our community, and we're willing to go all the way in order to make sure that these social justice issues that you may be paying attention to, or who you're not paying attention to, like I always say, people focus on what's being said, but I like to focus on what people don't say. So if you talk to me, I'm not only digesting what you're saying, but I'm also listening to the messages of what you're not bringing up about a particular topic, what doesn't exist. And I think a lot of that was reflected in these votes for how the community feels. And you cannot. And this goes back to President Barack Obama, and I think some of the strategy that the Democratic Party took advantage of is you cannot shame people into submission of votes. That's not going to work. You know, I think we saw that in 2016 when people were transparent about them, they're going to vote for Donald Trump at the water cooler, if you will, at work, or in the hallways at work, and having these conversations. And then the outpouring of shame and the way that they were treated afterwards for suggesting that they were going to vote for Donald Trump. And it didn't stop people from turning out to vote for Donald Trump, in which he won that election. It's just that people ended up reserving themselves and they exaggerated their voices at the ballot box. You know, they said you're going to hear and you're going to feel the support, but I have learned my lesson as far as saying that out in public because of fear of being canceled, fear of retaliation. So the Democratic Party has to understand that. I don't know who came up with that strategy, who suggested that that was going to be the approach and means of responding and getting people to vote for their particular candidate over another. And also, too, and too many times in these particular interviews, did you hear and see when President Harris went on these talk shows and went on these interviews that it was a vote for me because you don't want Trump and Trump is bad and this is and that. And it's like people want to know, we hear that, but people want to know what is it exactly that you're going to do. And I think she missed too many opportunities in communicating what was she going to do, what was the Democratic Party going to do, why would it be beneficial for me to vote for you and support you. And she didn't do enough of that. They wanted to hear about the economy. You know, if people are saying right, wrong, or indifferent, but people are saying you're responsible, your administration is responsible for the inflation that is occurring, the fact that I can't buy my simple everyday food items from the grocery store, or I'm having a hard time with the cost of my home, the hard time, the cost of the insurance, all these different things that people were communicating, and you don't offer up a plan with a viable solution and substance as to how you're going to fix that. If people see you as being the problem and you're not able to articulate a clear, concise plan of how you're going to get it done, not only what you want to do, right? Because people, they talked about what it was that she wanted to do, and she also communicated that, but she didn't communicate how they were going to get it done. And people want to know the how. You know, too many times politicians and politics has been filled with these fanciful promises and ideas, and this is this grand scheme of what we want to bring to the Americans. However, when you dig deeper and ask, well, what is the backing behind that? How do you get this 25,000 for first-time home buyers? How do you pay for these new child tax credits? And when you ask that in interviews, and then you try to divert and pivot to, well, what is Trump going to do? You know, that doesn't work. That doesn't sit well, as you can see. So we really have to have a conversation about who are these Democratic strategists, and then what is the new message and what is the new approach that Democrats are going to put forward to reclaim and retain those who sit on the left. As you know, we've heard in this country, or if I've heard on a couple of recent interviews, that this country is not a left-leaning progressive country. We're not. We are a moderate right country. And so the policies need to fit somewhere closer to the middle of the alignment because, you know, in the primaries, when they come around, the primaries typically have your more extreme fringes of the particular party that show up. Your downright hard supporters show up in the primaries. But once you start to move towards the general election, your messaging has to come more central focused, and you have to also pay attention to rural communities. You have to pay attention to the backbone of America, which is our blue collar workers. And I don't think enough focus was on that. And regardless if you agree with Trump or you say, well, he has an ineffective inability to communicate. And I think that at that point, that's just kind of getting into academia and philosophy at that point, because the results are the results and we can see what those results are. You have to pay attention to the fact that the people who had to vote for Trump felt like he was recognizing those blue collar workers, those rural workers, those on the farmlands. And I mean, like, we can always combat or debate what the policies actually are and the outcomes of the inflation and economics and what's going to happen with the economy with him in there. But right now, I think, we want to deal on a broader surface level to say where the disconnect existed at and what has been happening with the Democratic Party as we've been going on and on and on. Because that's where your focus has to be. And we can always figure out a plan and an approach to fixing this particular issue. So as we dive into the numbers and we really look at what was going on in this last election, I think it's important for us to explore this to indeed see what this breakdown was in votes. And so when you look at the demographics in votes and you look at men and you see 45% in 2020 went with Biden and 44% in 2024 for Harris, and for women virtually unchanged, a couple percentages of 57% showed up for Biden in 2020 and 54% showed up for Harris in 2024. If you look at Trump, you see the 53% of men and 54% in 2024. And for women, 42% and 44% in 2024. But as it says, turnout for Trump spiked among Hispanic, Latino, and Asian voters. So when you look at white people for Trump, you see the 58% to 55% in 2024. And then for Biden and Harris, you see 41% in 2020 for Biden, 43% in 2024 for Harris. You can see where we are with Black people for Trump, and 12% in 2020, as well as 12% in 2024. And then Black people for Biden at 87%, and for Harris in 24%. But let's look right here at this vast difference of turnout in 2020 for Hispanic and Latinos for Trump was at 32%. And then you see this balloon effect of 45% for Trump in 2024. And when you drop down and you look for Biden, and there were 65% Hispanic and Latinos that turned out for him in 2020, but it drops down to 24% in it drops down to 53% in 2024 for Harris. And same thing when you look at Asians for Trump, 34%, with a 4% difference in 2024, uptick, of course, to 2024 for 38%, and 61% for Biden in 2020, and it drops down to about 56% to Harris in 2024. But even let's pull that, let's delve down a little bit more into those numbers, and let's break it out among sex by race. And you see Trump's largest voter gains among Hispanic, Latino men and women. So you look at Trump for white men, it's at 61% in 2020 and 59% in 2024. And for Harris, 38%. For Biden and Harris, 38% for Biden in 2020 and 39% for Harris in 2024. But let's scroll down, or we'll look at Black men for Trump is 19% in 2020. Black men for Trump in 2024 is at 20%. And for Biden and Harris, Black men is at 79% in 2020, and it kind of holds steady to 78% in 2024. Which, Black men, they were wagging their fingers at Black men. Black men seem to pretty much hold tight on what they did as far as their turnout. But I also want to make sure that we recognize too, that don't forget, there was a fall off in participation for how many voters showed up. Remember, as we spoke to earlier, Joe Biden got 81 million votes in the popular vote in the 2020 election. And this go around, Trump won the popular vote with 71 million votes. So you see a drop off of people who even showed up to participate in this particular election as well. We have Black women remain steady. They know they are the most loyal to the Democratic Party. So in 2020 for Biden, they showed up and voted 90% for Biden. And there was an uptick in 2024 for Vice President Harris at 92%. But now let's go down to Hispanic and Latino men. And this is where there's a vast change, as mentioned in the title of this particular section, where you see 36% for Hispanic Latino men in 2020 for Trump, and then it balloons to 54% in 2024 for Trump. So you see this large jump. One of the largest jumps out of all demographics is among Hispanic and Latino men. And you also see with Biden in 2020, it's at 59% for Biden in 2020, and it drops down to 44% for Harris in 2024 among Hispanic Latino men. There's also a change in Hispanic Latino women where they're at 30% turnout and vote for 2020 for Trump, but then it moves up as well and increases to 37% in 2024 among Hispanic Latino women. And then for Biden and Harris, you see the drop off from 69% for Biden in 2020 to 61% for Harris in 2024. So I asked that question. Remember, that was one of my other questions, is that in our own echo chambers among the Black community, and we thought about all this support for Harris, what was going to happen with other minorities? What were they going to do in this upcoming election? And that was very important. I think that was something that they took for granted, where I didn't see there was enough attention actually focused on the other minority communities and gravitating towards them to really explain and start to make sure you peel back the layers to see what that support was going to be. I think there was definitely some missed opportunities for those who are strategists for Democratic Party. And there needs to be a revamping and refocus on that. When it comes to Trump making those rounds, and you can get off into the philosophies and the academic discussions on if he was truly viable, truly articulate or not. I think that he still made it a point, or at least the voters also say that they feel like he made it a point to connect with them and to speak towards issues that they indeed sympathize with. And Harris, maybe not so much doing that. Don't know if she really got out there and delivered that message. I'm going to say don't know. I mean, based off the results, right? That's why the numbers are important, because we can have these philosophical differences. However, these numbers are the results, and this is what it is. And the Democratic Party indeed needs to respond to that and make changes in the future to make sure that they're addressing these issues of where they fell short at. And of course, you can always make space and always say that you have to make an acknowledgement for there indeed being sexism and racism that plays a role into this decision making. You give that a percentage. However, you can't make that the total percentage as to why people didn't show up to vote for Vice President Harris. But I absolutely think that it would be irresponsible to not make space for that. But those are things in which you can't control. And there's no way that you can introduce moral suasion into eradicating racism from out of a person. Booker T. Washington tried that, as well as W.E.B. Du Bois, who suggested, we get these degrees and we get these honorariums and acknowledgments and accolades, and then white people may say or suggest that we're not those people and will treat us better and not deliver that racism to us. However, we both seen in Booker T. Washington's case and W. Du Bois's case that largely that did not have impacts, as of course the atrocities still occurred. So recognizing that you have to focus on those things in which you can control, and that's speaking towards those issues that truly did impact those who decided to vote in this particular election. Even paying attention to those things with the economy, there was some numbers that came out and spoke to with the economy, what are some of the things that voters cared about? And so it says, for as far as housing costs, 79% were very much or somewhat concerned about their housing costs and wants the president and his next Congress to address that. Another thing was the cost of food and groceries, where 91% are very much or somewhat concerned about the cost of their food and groceries. And lastly is the healthcare costs, where you have 84% who are very much or somewhat concerned about their healthcare costs. So when, running for president, of course, it's, as mentioned previously, or as mentioned in other discussions, it's a popularity contest, of course, and you have to have the charisma, but you have to be able to reflect the thing that the large base of those who are going to vote are talking about. And clearly, the Democratic Party did not do a good job at focusing on indeed what those voters were saying that they were truly concerned about. And so there definitely needs to be a revamping, a restructuring, and reframing of what the Democratic Party's message is, what their focus and what their platform is, want to be on, because this country is not a left-leaning progressive country. This country is a moderate right-leaning country. And so we have to take that into consideration for those policies and politics that we introduce. And, we have to do better at identifying other people, right? Those people who are in those positions at the top, who have been there at the top, have had a chance, and they grossly fouled up on this go around when it comes to those elections. But I think that's because you have to spread the representation, you have to spread the message on who you're getting, those foot soldiers that you're getting within the community to help represent the Democratic Party, and to make sure you're not alienating those blue collar workers who are the backbone to this economy and the strength of this economy and a representation on a world stage of the United States of America. And hearing what these families are dealing with, it's hard to overcome some of the issues when people view you as the problem. Um, that Biden Harris administration, people are largely right, wrong, or indifferent, holding them responsible for the rising cost of those products and the aforementioned. And so you have to really go all in and maybe overcompensate on your response for how you're going to address that when people largely see you as the problem. And I don't know it's not that I don't know, it's just the messaging was not as strong coming from that particular party to invite the voters to really feel secure in selecting Vice President Harris as the next leader to make sure that they tackle those issues. So these are the outcomes, right? This is it. I know some people feel like they're voting against their own best interests when it comes to Trump, and I think we, as a citizenry, we have to begin to identify other leaders and build a bench, and we have to figure out and come into alignment more so with the messaging of what people want. That is unfortunate. Once you operate in this position in the public sphere, you have to understand that you represent the ideals and the principles of the society in which you live and in which you choose to govern. And you can't do it alone, right? You need other people to be your surrogates, other people to serve as those models of influence for you around the country. And I don't think the Democratic Party is really doing enough and has a pulse on what this country wants, what this country is looking for, and finding other leaders that can truly reflect those principles, and also to make this country better among itself and to itself. And until there is a deeper dive, recognition, and a stopping of the, I don't want to say bullying tactics to make people want to align with certain messaging, then they're going to continue to have these issues, because though people may retreat, they are going to exercise time after time, again and again, in these different elections as far as what this country wants. And you got to think about this: the minority votes, they also were in alignment with what the larger white majority wanted, as we saw through those numbers. So there has to be a response and recognition to that as well. Feel how you want to feel about it, but it's our job as political scientists and political analysts to explore those different ideologies and really come up with some type of strategy that is inclusive of them. And perhaps with this next Republican, especially Republican leadership, especially they have the landslide that it looks like they're about to have if they grab the House. Well, they're going to have to do something with it, because the American people are going to say, you have the president of the United States, you have control of the Senate, you have control of the House, and your Supreme Court justices are leaning right, conservatively. So you have all of the pieces on the chessboard align for the checkmate and to be able to push through a lot. So if you say that you're the ones who are going to bring us out of the depths of these debt that we find ourselves in as an economy, you're going to fix this economy. Well, you have pretty much everything that you need. So if you don't deliver, then what's going to happen in a couple of years, 2 years, 4 years from now? They won't see this type of power again for a long time, because you have to show up. Now you got to put your money where your mouth is. And that's a huge benefit, in a sense, because two things are going to happen. Either the Republican Party will be exposed for doing a lot of talk, all talk, no walk, or they're going to improve things in this economy. And from here on up, it's going to be on an upward trajectory as far as what it means to live in America and experience America. Besides whatever the social issues that we may find ourselves in. So, I mean, I see a benefit for those who sit on the other side either way. It's kind of like a win-win as we go through this tunnel of unknown, as to what's going to happen with our economy. And at least there'll be some type of quick response. But as I always tell people too, our grandparents, even our parents, depending on what generation you're in, they went through much worse situations with much worse much worse economy, but as far as social ills and issues go. So if we want to find out that response to how we can fix it or how we thrive in this particular situation, at least they all gave us the gift of writing it out in the books. They've written blueprints, manifestos, on how we can overcome this too. And don't forget, that stuff is definitely on the presidential level, and that represents our economy. But we have to figure out what's in our control and what we're going to do as a people to connect and foster better relationships and better outcomes within our neighborhoods, and really try to think about a sense of self-sufficiency. We look to our minority neighbors, equally realize too that they don't have a lot of members in Congress, a lot of members in government, but they really take care of their people, among their people, and create the economic sectors and needs for things that they essentially warrant to make them successful. And so we as a people too have to really realize that and do that. And even in some of these aspects where you do have Black men that didn't vote for Kamala, don't forget you also had Black women who didn't vote for Kamala as well. But if all those Black people would have voted for Kamala, you still would have the particular outcome that you have now. And that means that President Trump still gets in office. So we have to also recognize that too, and begin to vastly expand our appeal to other people if we want to gain the power, just because the numbers are not in our favor. I think that is, of course, something that you have to give credit to President Obama for recognizing and being able to do. And so as we move forward with the planning purposes and strategies of how we get up out of this, more people have to have more of these discussions, have to offer more of their opinions on the matter that come from a place out of love and a solution oriented place instead of pointing the finger. And you have to have more of our political scientists, our political analysts come to the table and work through these things to figure out what it looks like for us moving forward. I'm here in Florida. So Florida was definitely a red state with blue pockets, but definitely not enough blue pockets to change the outcomes. And so we have to look at how are we going to make these vast impacts and bring more people to the table. I think that's the way that you do this. And we have a lot of bright minds who can be involved, but we have to get rid of those. I'm only choosing people within my circle and expand that, because that approach is not working out in our favor clearly. So I think once we move beyond that and expand the opportunity for collaboration, and we introduce some cooperation among each other and the different facets of what represents the Democratic Party, and become a little bit more to the middle, we will find solid outcomes and results for the future. So you know, the words of Jesse Jackson, keep hope alive. Don't let these outcomes walk you down too much. Just recognize that we need to go back to the drawing board and facilitate some very important, tough discussions on what we're going to do as a people. And this is House of I-10. This is just an election recap from 2024. We'll see how this pans out. And just know we've been in worse positions before. So I'm very optimistic. You stay optimistic, stay hopeful, and we're going to do this, you know. Peace.